Here we are a day after the elections to discuss the future we see democratic decision making. Well, what a timely topic it is after such a day. It's going to be a very interesting talk. We're going to talk about citizen assemblies, about self-governance, self-rule, from India, from the Netherlands, examples all over the place to discuss what do we need to actually make decision making more democratic.
Welcome, everyone here in the room, those of you joining online. My name is Mendha-Lekha. I'm currently the interim co-director of Bovens, together with Karin van Bokstel over there. Bovens is an environmental justice and human rights organization. We work with various civil society organizations across the world. And we are very happy to welcome you here in our office, here in Utrecht, for the third and the last session of the Future We See series. This series is really about hope, about inspiration, and I think we really need that today in the Netherlands, but also across the world. And this series is really about practitioners, visionaries, showing their views and their perspectives on how we can transform our systems and really get to this just society that we want to achieve.
Thank you so much. Let's start with our guests. Milind Bokil, partner of the G1000 Citizens Assembly and founder of Burgerberaad Academie. Ozan Alakavuklar, not bad, associate professor organizing social impact at the Utrecht University. But let's start with our person on the television from India, Milind Bokil. Great to have you here, and you hear us loud and clear, I see, thanks to your expressions. You're a writer, a sociologist, and expert on the village of Mendha-Lekha. So great to have you.
Thank you very much, and I'm very glad to meet all of you there sitting. And this is a great advantage of technology that I'm sitting in a corner of India and you are sitting there and both of us can interact. So this village that I will be talking about is a very interesting village in the sense that they have given a slogan which reads like, you know, our capital is Delhi. So the first part says, our government in Delhi. But the second part says, that we are the government in our village, in our community. So the first part represents the representative democracy that all of us follow, but the second part represents the direct participatory democracy that this village follows.
Let's go to our second guest, Miriam from the G1000. Yeah. Great to have you here. A great initiative. Maybe you can tell us a bit something about this Citizens Assembly.
Yeah. I will. Well, I'm Milind Bokil from G1000 Foundation in the Netherlands, and we've been organizing citizens' assemblies all through the Netherlands for the last 10 years. So we've done a lot of citizens' assemblies and learned a lot about also things not to do. And to tell you a bit more about what a citizens' assembly is, because maybe some of you have never heard of a citizens' assembly. In Dutch it's called Burgerberaad, so maybe you've heard of that. And we choose our members by sortition. So people get an invite, then we do a second sortition to have like a big, diverse group of people who talk about a topic. And there are really, so I think the hopeful part of this is that there are really different kind of people in the room, and they're always really willing to come to an agreement.
Ozan, beautiful, because you're into organizing social impact. Well, talking about impact, which is a word which I think we see more and more often. How did your interest in organizing social impact started?
Yes, I'm a critical organization studies scholar and have been working for Utrecht University School of Governance for around 4.5 years now. And in the last 3 years, we have been working on developing this master's program called Organizing Social Impact. And this reflects our research interest, but also bring our pedagogical engagement with students who would like to create impact in the society by engaging with various organizations. And for us, we have a particular understanding to engage with social impact because we see that there are lots of pressing challenges right now, and at the political level, at the economic level, environmental level. And we see that there are various bottom-up organizing or bottom-up organizational processes that challenge or that tackle these kind of societal and economic pressures.
What thing is mostly wrong with our current ways of making decisions as societies?
Maybe a good example might be here at a meso level, at a macro level, is 2008 financial crisis and afterwards, because here what we have seen is that these big financial corporations were falling down and the decision was made to save them instead of investing in public services. Yeah. So what does this tell us? To what extent we can give voice and to what extent we can transform these kind of relations for the sake of taxpayers, for the citizens? And then also at an organizational level, how can we organize things differently so that we have a say in the ownership of, for instance, the business or the social enterprise, and then we can do decisions by ourselves. So these are the kind of entry points for me in the sense of how things should change, beginning from challenging the power relations, coming from ownership, coming from economic relations, and turning this into more political change.
Milind, if I ask you what's currently wrong with our ways of making decisions, how would you define the problem?
Yes, I think we consider democratic decision making as the epitome of human civilization. And we think that democracy itself is a great thing, which is true. But the way we take decisions is usually by majority vote, 60-40, 70-30, or even 51-49, and so on. So when you do majority vote, there is implicit violence made against those who are in minority. Now, minorities are of various types, and they are based on ethnicity, they are based on religion, they are based on faith, and they are based on some other perspectives also. So in majority decision making, this injustice or violence is very much implicit into it. And that doesn't take into consideration what the other party is saying. It is quite possible that those who are opposing or those who are not in agreement might be saying something very true, very genuine, and that's something we must understand. We must factor that into our decision-making process.
Miriam, how's that for you? What's for you the most biggest problem when it comes to how we come to decisions on whatever level we're just discussing? We'll make it more concrete later on, but
yeah. Well, I think, at this moment, of course, we had the elections last night, and I think it's more of a popularity contest instead of really about all these topics that are really a big problem. And the politicians are really, it's really about the person, not anymore about statesmen, and that really worries me. And the politicians are really, when they make decisions, they're already thinking about new elections. Will I be re-elected? What will this mean for my political party? While in a citizens' assembly, people can talk about the future without all these worries about, will I be re-elected or anything like that. And I think a really big difference is also that it's all about debate in the current way. So it's really about what separates us on the things we don't agree on, instead of what is our common ground. What do we share? What do we think is important?
What are the? Let's navigate here also with you here too, Miriam, Ozan, who wants to start. What are important circumstances to have a correct citizens' assembly? And then Ozan, also your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think a really diverse group is already, so you get these real different kind of perspectives in the room.
Okay.
And it's also important that you're all in the room together, so you can look each other in the eye and see who's sitting next to you. And you're talking to each other on a base of equality, so there's no hierarchy that the voice of you is more important than my voice. And it's all based on dialogue, so we have these rules we start with. We start citizen assemblies with some rules on the way we want to talk to each other. And one of the really powerful rules is you don't have to agree. And of course, later on in the Citizens' Assembly, you have to agree. But if you start with this rule, you see people to start telling each other stories instead of trying to convince the other that they're right. So I always think this is really powerful for people to just sit in each other. And we start with small groups, make changes. So you speak to a lot of people, a lot of different perspectives. And then later on in our Citizens' Assembly, also a lot of processes are based on consensus. And the basic of our work is also based on non-violent communication. So you really talk about what are your needs or what do you think is important.
So what is the non-violent method of taking decisions? So consensus decision making, that is, everybody's consent is required. And unless everybody agrees, you can't take the decision. You should not take the decision. That is the real solution to our so-called democratic decision making, that we should go by consensus. So this tribal village was taking decisions by consensus. That was their tribal ethos and that was the tradition. But these decisions were taken by men. Only men would come to the assembly and they would take the decision. So can you call this consensus? No, you can't call because women are not there. So when these social workers went to these villages, and some of them are my friends, and they started working with the village, they said, no, this can't be true consensus unless women come to the assembly and unless they sit together, you can't call it consensus. So the whole process began with women's participation and women coming into the assembly, putting their voice, putting their decisions, putting their opinions, and then only the whole consensus could really arrive. And this is similar to what she said about the citizens' assemblies. Now, citizens' assemblies in Netherlands are, I could see from those pictures that people are participating. The same thing happens in this village. When you allow everybody to participate, then everybody's internal potential comes out, and then that helps towards a more harmonious, more non-violent, and more amicable decision making, which satisfies everybody.
Yeah, I guess the interest of everyone should be at least on the table. And then from there, perhaps we can begin a kind of open conversation, what's going on in this kind of environment. And I guess it's really important at what level really we talk about here. It's about representative politics, it's about representative democracy, it's about a kind of, for instance, cooperative worker ownership model. So the key here is, I guess, what are the interests, what's the motivation, what's the mission, and how we can do things a bit differently in the sense of this opening up decision-making practices, being open to each other, sort of having a consensus decision-making process. And again, when we look at the history of privatizations, neoliberal politics around the privatization of market relations, then we miss that actually there are many people who are under the radar and who are not, whose interests are not considered. So for me, it's a matter of power relation, and how can we make these power relations visible so that we can keep these people or organizations or institutions accountable to us and also to each other.
Yeah. So Milind, could you share how does this accountability work within the village, for instance, or other examples you have?
Right. So see, as Ozan just now said, that there are always differences in people. There is a lot of inequality, especially traditional societies like India. There is a lot of inequality in it. And there are rich, there are poor, there are privileged people, and so on and so forth. So when it actually comes to taking decisions, and many people have apprehensions about how consensus could be achieved, and accountability is very much part of it. So that consensus can be achieved only if all of you agree beforehand. And that is the beauty of this principle, that once you agree that everybody has this power to say no, a kind of veto power, but not veto power in the hands of privileged few, but veto power with everybody, then alone this principle works, and then only your decisions become accountable.
Yeah, so it's really a new way of talking to each other. And what you see happen with the participants is that they really go from a personal interest to a shared interest. And that's just by the process they are, they're how do you say it? They walk through this process. And you really see a different way of thinking starting to happen in these processes. And if you do this process in the right way, people feel, again, engaged and feel ownership on the problem, but also on the solution. So you get this shared ownership on the problems, and people are not saying anymore, well, they don't do anything, but they're saying, okay, what can we do together?
When you're discussing in consensus making, how does compromising is that part of it, or is that really something else?
And what's the problem with a compromise? It becomes bland. It becomes something.
Well, I mean, it's oftentimes not really ambitious enough to reach climate goals, for example.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so
let's start with that
maybe
one?
let's start.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
This is a beautiful question, and many people have this thing in their mind that when you say consensus, are you going to bulldoze a consensus? Are you going to enforce consensus? No, that is not the idea. The consensus is that your basic problem, your grievance, it is not a process to erase your opinion, or it is not a process to discount your opinion. It is that all of us have to take certain decisions, and mind you, these decisions are basically taken at a very small micro level or at a village level or a community level. So there, when you want to take a certain decision, then if all the people are agree to that, then the decision can be performed better. So you don't have to compromise. You have to actually put forth your point very strongly. And you must try to convince even another person saying that, look, what I am saying is right and I feel right. And so let me put it forward. So everybody puts it forward. And then out of that churning, consensus emerges. So consensus is by no means bulldozing anybody's decision, because then that would be majority decision making if some people started bulldozing the decision. Consensus really allows you to put forth your viewpoint, give you a chance to convince other people, and then try to attain something in a very, very non-violent manner.
More perspective on this?
Yeah.
Miriam, yeah?
Well, I think the way you do a citizen assembly is like so totally different than in a debate in which you come to a compromise. Because we always start with the question, what do you think is important about this topic? And when you share the things you find important, you get all these different kind of perspectives before you make a decision. And then you really see the shift which people make from their personal interest to a shared interest. So you can, as a society as a whole, you look to what do we think is important for the future. And so sometimes you see someone who says, well, this is really not in my personal interest, but I understand why it is important for us as a society as a whole. And I want to quote one of the politicians who was involved with citizen assembly in Reden, and he was saying it is encouraging that citizens can achieve what governments cannot achieve at international climate summits, working on natural gas-free villages and neighborhoods and a green and climate-proof environment using new materials sparingly and produce less waste. So I think that's really hopeful that citizens are capable to make these decisions together if you talk about it in a dialogue.
Yeah, great.
Just a small addition. I guess the notion of compromise, probably this may take place, but I think the solidarity aspect or the community aspect may play a critical role. Maybe for this kind of very major, very large scale kind of decisions, lots of things going on, lots of power relations may go on. So it would require a definite certain analysis, but for these citizen assemblies or for this kind of community initiatives or even for cooperative organizing, for instance, when it comes to my topic, it is not only about what I will get out of this, it's more about, okay, what we can get out of this kind of conversation, and do we have a say in the future that we want to put or that we want to create together. And that is the kind of perspective I would like to bring. So to what extent we can have a more solidar environment, solidarity practices, so that we can think about not only well-being of us, but also the others. Of course, again, scale is a very major can be a constraint, but also enabler, I guess.
No, you are perfectly right. Many times people have this question that at a community level, you can attain consensus because everybody knows each other, people are part of the family, so on and so forth. But what happens in parliament? But suppose, as Mariam just now shared, is it your personal interest or is it going to be a general interest? Is it going to be people's interest? Is it going to be humanity's interest? And then if you think from that perspective, then you will find that consensus is not difficult to achieve. Now, Parliament, the problem is people come from so-called opposition parties. And even before coming to the decision, they have decided that I am supposed to oppose. So that is why the problem comes.
True. Miriam, maybe also interesting to bring in what France is doing when it comes to the climate panel they had and...
Yeah, I think that's really interesting as well, and maybe many of you know also in Ireland about abortion. There was a citizens' assembly about abortion, which was really interesting. That at the end of the citizens' assembly they decided for abortion, which was a really hot topic there and quite polarized. And that were just 99 citizens that were talking about, but still, then there was a referendum, and the whole of Ireland was for it as well. So you can discuss, there's just a small group of people, but there also happens something with whole society when you see this diverse group of people talking about things. And if the process is transparent enough and citizens are taken seriously, then you can also see whole society make these shifts.
What is your view on time in a citizens' assembly?
I think time is really important, to really take the time to get to know each other and hear about each other's perspective. But it's also a challenge because some people don't have that much time for a citizen assembly. So we're always we're really learning in what is the best way.
Following up on that, nothing is perfect, and there are all these kind of experiments, and it applies to many things actually. And I guess, the priorities. What's our priority here? What's it about? And here, at the community level, the priority is the well-being of the community. If the Citizens' Assembly, it's about how we can give voice. And then the question comes, okay, we may talk about this maybe weeks, but do we have this kind of luxury? Maybe not. So then what are we do? So we do, that's kind of my perspective here, we do our best within the given constraints. And then trying to make it all the time better and better and better, and learning from the experiments and our experiences. And still, I guess that's why also we are here, right? That we are still learning from these kind of experience to make it better. And that also applies to many other structures about representative democracy. Is it the perfect model? Not there yet. No. Citizen assemblies, yes, lots of values in it. The perfect model, getting there. So, or ownership models, as I argue about. Cooperatives, for instance, look like a wonderful model because we have immediate say in the future of what we own. It might be our labor, it might be the infrastructure, it might be the product we produce. But still, we are not autonomous from the other institutional and market relations. So there are all these kind of pressures. How you navigate these pressures, so on and so forth. So my point is, it's a matter of learning and taking the courage to learn from all these kind of experiences. Yeah.
How do we ensure that environmental interests are considered in these rather citizen assemblies?
Maybe I can just, there are, again, I will refer to a bit sort of experimental or still going on, but there are these discussions about rights to nature. Maybe you have heard about that. I think that might be kind of one of the ways to move forward in the sense of considering the needs of the non-human. And indigenous communities play a very critical role there. And there are, for instance, to my knowledge, in New Zealand, there's the Whanganui River, who had this kind of constitutional right, I guess, so in the sense of representative through the indigenous communities. Because for some indigenous communities, I can say about Maori indigenous community, they feel like that they are part of the land. So they do not really have this kind of Western understanding, the nature and the human. They are already into each other. And from their perspective, they are the river, they are the mountain. And then this rights to nature can be very instrumental to protect the interest of the non-human. But of course, I'm not sure how this may turn into practice in broader level. That's probably back for more experiments in the sense of decision-making processes.
And this particular village is the first village in India which has received community forestry rights. In India, we passed a law in 2006 whereby those people who are living in the forest were entitled to have community forest rights. So this village has got rights over 1900 hectares of forest. And they conserve this forest, they make use of this forest, and then that's how the whole process of self-governance actually started with nature.
From a perspective of the ownership stuff that you're studying and also practicing, how is that linked when it comes to personal interests, general interests, ownership? I think it's interesting also to touch this.
Yeah, I think, again, for me, at least for my understanding, it begins with that how we organize our economy. Yeah. So that from this economy, how we can think about different forms. And for me, or at least particularly from Yeah, I draw arguments, and I'm quite inspired by sociologist Erik Olin Wright, who passed away in 2019, but he really thought about this transformation. How can we transform these kind of relations? And he argues about three main values, and if we can organize around three main values, then perhaps we may have a bit more egalitarian, participative, inclusive societies, and then perhaps that's the moment where we can see these interests may align to some extent. I do not think that everyone can get aligned in one particular interest, that there will be always different interests, and then these interests may become more interesting with the notion of power. So to what extent we can have equal access to material and social means? This is actually how we can have a bit more egalitarian access to the resources, and ownership is there. Who owns what, and whether we may have a say in the ownership. And democracy and freedom, again, then becomes a part of this conversation. Can we meaningfully participate in decisions that have an impact on our lives? So if I own this building, and if I say this building is mine, and if I want to kick you out, then I'm sorry, but there's a problem here, right? Because you may also have a say here. And then the third value is community solidarity. That how we can consider the well-being of others, and can we be responsible to others and not only us. Let's create counter power. And how can we do this? That's why I'm interested in bottom-up organizing. And I see lots of potential there in the sense of, for instance, trade unions is a kind of resistance to capitalist relations, or community organizations who are not really into challenging the relations, but by nature they do things different, and we can learn from them. And as long as these kind of democratic or economic innovations are picked up by institutional forms, then we see the transformation.
Milind, when it comes to these engagements, how do you see these engagements within the examples you gave, and well, the system as such, which is majority-based and veto rules, etc., as you said in the beginning?
There is a concept which is again used by Mahatma Gandhi. In Hindi, it is called as swaraj. I mean, I'm just coining the word so that people get familiar with that. But it literally means self-rule. Now, self-rule does not mean my rule over you or my rule over her. But self-rule means my rule over myself. So first, I discipline myself. I control my desire. I understand myself. I know what are my roles, responsibilities. And then only I go forward with interacting with others. And perfectly true, Mahatma Gandhi said, and he wanted to make a kind of combination between capitalism on the one hand and so-called communism on the other hand at that time. So he suggested that we should behave in a trusteeship manner. He said that those who want to work with the industry, those who want to earn profit and all, they can do. I mean, capitalist mode of production. But the capitalist should behave as if he or she is a trustee of the wealth that he or she has created. And you should not enjoy that wealth, but you should understand that I am the trustee of this whole wealth, and the wealth is of the whole people. So it is the trusteeship concept which was propagated by him, and that fits perfectly in the modern system. That, okay, you do enterprise. Nobody prevents you from doing enterprise. If you have potential, if you have intelligence, please go ahead and do the enterprise. But think that you are a trustee of the environment, you are a trustee of the society, you are a trustee of the enterprise that you are doing. And then alone you will be able to attain a kind of non-violent system where everybody, and that he has used the word, the good of all. I mean, it's not just good of myself or my family or my small community, but the good of all. And the good of all means the good of all, the whole world.
I think what's really interesting also, what Milind is saying, is about we have this philosophy that the participants lead themselves, right? I think that's a real important thing, of democratic value in the whole process, that you decide for yourself which steps you want to take. So we give the participants a lot of ownership also on the process they are walking through, but also like on the experts they want to invite and the questions they want to ask at the experts.
And I'm wondering how do the power relations work in such an environment?
Personally, I find it very difficult that because there are those who have the privileges, and how you will push the agenda so that they will compromise from their privileges.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe that it's a kind of ongoing contestation between different parties, different groups, and it's a matter of organizing.
Let's make it practical. Many young people here, students. Ozan, you also said yourself, you're also within the university active yourself. When it comes to daily becoming part of democratic decision making, what kind of examples do you have, and how can we all play a part being in this room?
I think everyone can play their role because we are all engaged in various forms of organizations. So I am part of the university, you are part of a student union, you are part of Citizens Assembly. We are all part of this kind of engagements. So for me, it begins again by how you want to get organized and where is your place in this kind of environment and what you want to achieve. So that's why I see big P politics where you go to ballot box every 4 years, but actually we are already by our choices engaged into variety of political decision making. What we buy, what we consume, what kind of transportation we choose. All these things are actually very political choices. And just being aware of this kind of engagements that you can actually begin by, okay, are my interests reflected here in this kind of environment? As an employee, are my interests reflected in the decision-making process? So this might be perhaps, at least for me, the beginning by asking these questions and then trying to have a say in your organizational context, whether it is a student union, whether it's a trade union, whether it's the university, through various mechanisms, but also in addition to already established mechanisms, you can always say that is not good enough, and then push for further. And that's where the contestation begins, because you begin contesting the established power relations and you say, let's do things a bit differently.
See, the bottom line is non-violence. We must be committed to non-violence and we must avoid violence at every step.
How do we combat those who are very violent with non-violence?
That question was answered by Mahatma Gandhi many times. And the simple answer is, in an analogy, suppose somebody is coming to you with a sword, what you should have in your hand? If somebody is attacking you with a sword, what you should do? The answer is, you should have the shield. You can't take a sword, because if both of you take the swords, then both of you might die or both of you might be injured. You can't run away, because then that will be cowardice. You have to be there. You have to diffuse the anger, the violence that the other person is having. So you have to take the shield. Sword becomes useless in front of a shield. So it is the shield, and the shield is a very powerful weapon. Or shield signifies your strength, your commitment, your lack of fear, and so on and so on. What happens that when somebody becomes violent, we also become violent in reaction to that violence. That is where the problem is. Other person becoming violent is not an issue. That you becoming violent as a reaction is a problem.
Miriam.
Well, first of all, if you get an invite for a citizens' assembly, please
say yes.
Say yes, because it's difficult to get young people in there. That's just
oh yes, that's true. Yeah.
And if you're in a citizens' assembly, please be critical. Do you get enough say about the topic? Do you really get the chance to talk about the things you think are important? Or is there too much things they're saying, no, you're not allowed to talk about it? No, please, if you feel, you have to feel empowered. So be critical if you're in a citizen assembly. And, but also, if you think there's a really difficult topic and my local government or maybe national government isn't doing enough, ask for a citizen assembly. We, as an organization, often help other citizens who say, we want a citizen assembly in our city or town or a region. So I think that's really important as well. And if you want to keep it really small, is start a dialogue with someone who's different from you and stay curious. Ask questions, don't judge too soon, right? So I think that's like a really small thing you can do.
We're out of time, but we had, I think, a great conversation to explore the possibilities next to the classical ways of building up a democracy, the new ways, how we blend them, what the circumstances are, what we learned from each other, etc., etc. So thank you so much for that. And let's give them applause.
Alles is verbonden, de wereld dragen we over aan het klein. Alles is verbonden en weet dan dat we samen veel sterker zijn. Alles is verbonden, laten we samen gaan staan en samen veel sterker.